after a week of very thorough benchmarking for you, I've got my full and 100% honest review of the Origin EVO17-S. Now, you may have already seen my more entertaining unboxing of this laptop, but this video is the serious one that'll actually help you determine if you should buy this computer. By the end of this video, you will know if this laptop is right for you or not. Keep watching for my take on the design and build quality, display quality, performance benchmarks for both creators and gamers, VR tests, sound quality, a look at the internals, battery life, quality tests on the speakers, the webcam, internal and external thermals, fan noise, pricing breakdowns, comparing it to its competition, and my overall top pros and cons. Now, price-wise, this machine starts at about $2,400 until you use the code next to my link in the description. That gives it about a $200 discount to $2,200. That's a great price for a computer with these specs. And the model that we have here is just a step above that at $2,800 after discounts. This includes the newest 12th gen i7 processor with a 3080 Ti GPU. It's honestly the best deal that I've found so far for a computer with these specs. And it's the only one that I've found with this very cool UV printing option. The MSI GE76 and the Alienware X17 R2 with these specs cost over $500 more than this. The Alienware X17 does include accidental damage though, which is pretty cool, although it is only a limited wed time offer. And the Razer Blade 17 for just a teeny tiny $1,000 more. The price to performance ratio is the most important factor though, so I've included links below in the description for all these other computers as well, just in case you decide to go with one of those after you see how they compare. Now, as far as the design goes, I'm really liking the sharper corners on the keys and the extra chiseled masculine design everywhere else. We've got a nice and sleek, slightly shinier material on the keys with a softer matte black material on the chassis and palm rests, which are surprisingly not too prone to fingerprints, unlike that Razer Blade 17. The RGB is decently bright, but for those of you who want really cool animations, you're going to be a little disappointed here because there aren't that many options, as this is a 4-zone RGB keyboard rather than a per-key RGB keyboard. A solid on or cycling through all the colors is good enough for me though. Secondary key illumination and a full-size number pad is definitely a big plus, considering it's more rare this year for some reason. The keys themselves are pretty comfortable, but I do prefer just a little bit more key travel. A little too shallow for my taste. The touchpad was just as nice and accurate as everything else that I've tested, and I did like the wider real estate that it offers. The clicks were above average with a nice and solid, precise feel to them. As far as the build quality overall, chassis flex and keyboard flex were pretty minimal, but the screen was a bit more flimsy than I prefer, with a slightly above average screen wobble. That honestly didn't really bother me though, because you don't actually notice it when you're typing on a pretty sturdy desk. You only really notice it upon opening the lid, which, because of the somewhat looser hinge, was actually extra smooth. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the ports. On the right side, we've got an SD card reader, two USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A ports, and some ventilation. And then on the back side, more ventilation on both the left and the right, with one USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type C port with Thunderbolt 4 and DisplayPort 1.4 capabilities, and the ability to charge the computer, an HDMI 2.1 port, an RJ45 Ethernet jack, and your power port. And then on the left side, a Kensington lock port, more ventilation, and a USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type A port, and a dedicated microphone and headphone jack. Alright, let's go ahead and crack this thing open and take a look at the internals. So we've got some pretty large chassis fans with a network of heat piping there in the middle. Right down here, our Corsair Vengeance DDR5 RAM. We've got two sticks of 16 gigabytes each for a total of 32. Our Gen 4 SSD drive. And over here, our removable and upgradable Wi-Fi card. And down at the bottom, our 91 watt-hour battery. And two pretty average sized speakers there on the sides. Now, when it came to the performance of the battery, I got 6 hours of HD streaming with screen brightness at 50%, but I was actually able to squeeze 9 hours of battery life out of this computer if it was just sitting there idle with the screen brightness at the lowest setting. And then recharging back to 100% took about 2.5 hours. Now, for the sound quality, I'd say the speakers on this laptop are just okay. I'm honestly not that impressed with any gaming laptop speakers except for maybe the MSI GE76 and most definitely the Razer Blade 17, but the volume for these speakers was unfortunately not that loud at only 73 decibels. These were the weakest speakers of them all, with most of them ranging around 80 decibels. The webcam. Most gaming laptops have absolutely horrendous webcams at only 720p, intense motion blur, and intense grain, but I was actually pretty impressed with the webcam on this computer. Less grain than the others, it handled lighting a lot better, and this one actually has double the pixels at 1080p resolution with much less motion blur. And here's a little test of that camera and microphone audio and video quality. Nothing too special with the microphone, but the video quality is a step up above the rest. Now, as far as the fan noise, in quiet mode we got 43 decibels. When gaming in performance mode we got nearly 53 decibels. And at full speed with fan boost turned on, 56 decibels. You can see here that it had the loudest performance mode fan noise levels that I've seen so far, and it tied with the GE76 and X17 in full speed mode. But what's even more important than the fan noise is the thermals. During my thermal imaging tests, I did find the center of the keyboard to be hot during heavy use, much like other gaming laptops tend to get. Part of what you're seeing here is actually surface level heat that's deep beneath the keyboard rather than the airborne heat, as it didn't feel overly hot for my hands. A lot more heat is actually released out the side vents rather than the keyboard area. It was only slightly hot and uncomfortable when my mouse hand was literally right next to it. Most people keep their mouse near the front end of their laptops though. The majority of the heat is actually released out the back of the laptop, as you can see right here with these rear vents. The bottom of the laptop releases a decent amount of heat as well, but even when I pushed it to its limits, it didn't feel too hot for my lap. For actual gameplay, I did have some pretty intense results. Due to how much power this computer was pushing in such a thin chassis, internal thermals were a little intense. At 1080p, you can see that it had the second highest thermals, second only to the Inferno that the Alienware X17R2 is. And at 4K, it actually surpassed the Alienware as the machine with the hottest CPU. An even larger gap with this computer and its competition when it came to the GPU temps at 1080p. And then not that much hotter in 4K, but still quite a bit hotter than the rest. And this right here is overall how it compared when averaging temps for all 9 games. This is the hottest that I've seen so far, but for some of you it may still be worth the higher than expected performance on one of the least expensive 12th gen laptops that I've seen so far this year. Because performance is the most important factor when it comes to buying a gaming or creator laptop. For Geekbench 5 we got a single core score of 1776 and a multi-core score of 13,451, which was the highest score we got for the single core and nearly the highest score for multi-core. For Cinebench R23, which simulates its raw rendering power, we got a single core score of 1806 and a multi-core score of 17,592. Again, nearly the highest for the single core and the highest for the multi-core. Very impressive for such a thin and inexpensive laptop. For 3D Mark, we had an overall score of 12,112, a graphics score of 11,999, and a CPU score of 12,802, which was surprisingly one of the lowest. For BrowserBench Speedometer, which measures the speed of web applications, we had a score of 240, which was again the absolute highest of them all. Its Gen 4 SSD was also just as incredibly fast as its competition at nearly 6.7 gigabits read and 4.9 gigabits write. That's pretty fast. For PC Mark 10, we got 6,431, which was the lowest, but honestly all of these gaming laptops perform nearly identical to each other. And for creative professionals, these were our Puget benchmark scores. For DaVinci, we got 1450, Premiere 829, Photoshop 1137, and After Effects 1009. The best that I've seen so far for After Effects and DaVinci, almost the best for Photoshop, but a little low in Premiere. All of these performance laptops rendered at speeds that were pretty similar to each other. But then when it came to actual gameplay, for Red Dead 2, I was impressed that among all the other much more expensive competition, it actually had the highest average FPS in HD and just barely the second highest in 1440p and 4K. For Tomb Raider and Call of Duty Black Ops 4, it had almost the highest for HD and 1440p gaming, but actually the lowest for 4K. In GTA 5 and Forza Horizon 4, it was as average gets when it came to FPS for my 1080p and 1440p tests. Again, for 4K, it didn't do too well. And similar results for Warzone and Cyberpunk, where it was up to par in all the resolutions until we got to 4K, where it was actually the slowest right there with the M17R5. Averaging all these these 9 games together gives us a much more broad perspective of this, where you can clearly see overall it was just as good as its much more expensive competition until we got to 4K. When games started putting more and more pressure on that GPU, making it hotter and hotter, unfortunately this computer fell victim to thermal throttling. If you plan to be using this computer for VR gaming, I was pretty pleased with how well it performed with my Oculus Quest 2 headset. It did a great job with it. But if you're looking for the best, most future-proof VR laptop, this isn't the one. As you can see, I only got a VR Mark score of 11,197, which was almost the lowest out of all the popular gaming laptops that I've tested. Now, as far as the quality of the display, I would have preferred it to be just a little bit brighter, as it only measured in at 273 nits. I prefer my laptops to be at least 300 minimum. Colors look pretty decent, although not as color accurate and vibrant as a photo editor would like it to be, with only 94% sRGB and 73% Adobe RGB. On their website, they claim that the QHD panel version of this laptop is actually 100% sRGB, and in my experience, those higher res panels are usually a bit brighter as well. I highly recommend, if you get this computer, to get the version with a 1440p QHD display. 4K I think is just a little bit overkill on a laptop, but 1440p is the sweet spot. Motion did look pretty awesome though on this 144Hz refresh rate. And I know every LCD panel is different when it comes to light bleed, but unfortunately I did have some near the bottom edge. But it was only really noticeable in an extra dark room when the content that was on screen was supposed to be completely black. So in this control center, we've got a bunch of different customizations to play around with. Under general settings, you can manually disable number pad and function key lock and your touchpad toggle. I keep this feature enabled because it actually does get kind of annoying when you accidentally touch the touchpad while gaming. And then under Windows devices, you can disable things like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, or maybe your webcam to make it unhackable for those of you that need some extra peace of mind. And then your dedicated GPU has your mux switch settings. Keeping it on maximizes performance, but turning it off maximizes your battery. And then performance lets you select between different performance profiles, but I found it much more intuitive to actually use this little handy performance button to cycle through those. Or if you just want to go absolutely nuts with your fans, you can do that right here. And then SPC is for the more advanced users that want to push this performance a little further. Be careful with these settings. And then you get just a few battery settings and some stats. And then display settings gives you just a little bit more control over your coloring. I usually think vibrant looks pretty good, or you can recalibrate your color if you want to. And then light settings is where all of the RGB magic happens. Honestly, not that many animations compared to what I'm used to, and they don't look as good with only 4 zones, but this mix animation that fades between all the colors I think looks pretty slick. And I'm really glad that this keyboard actually has secondary key illumination, unlike the new Alienware laptops we tested. You can also control the RGB animations on this little light bar on the front, and then device information just gives you a bunch of hardware info and some real-time stats. Now my overall top cons for this computer. Number 1 are those thermals. Whenever you try to inject this much power in such a thin chassis, you usually run into this problem. And unfortunately in this case it led to the hottest temperatures that I've seen so far. Although this computer still did limit it from going into the range of what would have been harmful for this machine. Just know that pushing this computer to its max at those temps will most likely shorten the lifespan of this computer. And number 2 were those speakers. Yes, I don't really care for most gaming laptop speakers, and these weren't any worse in quality than the rest, but I list it as a con due to the fact that it has the lowest volume out of all the gaming laptops that I've tested. Now my overall top reasons to get this computer. Number 1 is that price. This is one of the least expensive 12th gen gaming laptops with a 3080 Ti that you can find right now. And I think that it's a great deal considering how well it performs against the competition. Which leads me to my second pro, performance. It wasn't the fastest of the fast, but the fact that it was up to par against its much more expensive competition is pretty impressive. It's got a high score in my book when it comes to the price to performance ratio. Overall, this is a pretty decent laptop aside from those internal temperatures when pushing this computer to its max, but honestly, this new generation is built to handle temperatures that are even hotter than that. If this video helped you in any way and you plan to purchase this computer or one of its competitors that I compared it to, then please remember to purchase using one of my affiliate links in the comments and description below, as I get a small commission at no cost to you for every purchase made. And it's a major factor in keeping this channel going and getting better and better for you. Or if you just want to support this channel and help keep it growing, then please consider becoming a channel member by clicking on the join button below. I'd like to personally thank all of my members for their monthly contributions to this channel. I really appreciate you guys. And remember, every week I do a giveaway that randomly selects someone who's interacted with this channel in some way or filled out the form in the description. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe with notifications turned on to stay up to date with that, as well as staying up to date with all of my latest gaming PCs. And the winner for this week is...
Stavos.
Thanks for watching, guys. I love you guys. God bless.